Paws and Reflect. A Transformative Tail. By Elton Gar. Tyler laid in bed several seconds as the world's most annoying alarm clock bleated at him. Then, using all the effort he could muster, he slapped the clock. The noise stopped, and he glanced at the clock, hoping that he had finally broken it. Instead, he saw the number 740 in annoyingly bright digits. He sat up in bed. Had he really hit the snooze alarm 4 times? Lisa was going to be furious. He grabbed the closest pair of pants, the same ones he wore yesterday. He took only a second to scrape away the mustard he had spilled on them. The muffled sounds of the TV news seeped into the bedroom. He could hear the anchor's urgent tone, though the exact words were lost in a blur of economic downturns and geopolitical crises. Tyler stumbled into the bathroom and splashed water on his face, trying to wake up. He felt the stubble on his face, but there wasn't any time to shave, so he grabbed one of his wife's disposable razors and shoved it into his pocket. He'd deal with it later. He nearly tripped over Max as he walked into the kitchen. The unremarkable brown and white mutt laid on his bed near the entrance to the kitchen. He glanced up at Tyler, who bent down and rubbed the dog's ears.
"Do you really have time for that?"
Lisa said, her frustration evident in every sharp movement. She stood at the counter, flipping through her planner with one hand while stirring a pot of oatmeal with the other.
"Good morning,"
Tyler said, dumping the day-old coffee out of his mug and pouring himself a new cup.
"I have a busy day, so don't forget to pick up the dry cleaning. And you promised to help with the PTA meeting tonight."
Her voice was like a jackhammer. Tyler nodded absently, trying to ignore the world as his eyes drifted to the TV screen. Stock markets crashing, a new conflict brewing overseas, the anchor's voice droning on about the latest crisis. So much for any hopes of retirement, he thought. Not that he expected it to matter. The world was determined to destroy itself, one way or the other. The kids were already at the kitchen table, engaged in a heated argument over the last Pop-Tart.
"You had the chocolate one yesterday,"
his daughter yelled, her face scrunched up in anger.
"No way, it's my turn,"
his son shot back, clutching the foil-wrapped pastry like a prize. Tyler sighed, stepping between them and splitting the Pop-Tart in half, crumbs and filling going everywhere, then dropped what was left in front of them. The kids grumbled but accepted their halves until his son said,
"Her piece is bigger."
Ignoring the continued argument, he turned to the counter, attempting to pack lunches while juggling his phone, which buzzed incessantly with work emails. He considered for a moment throwing the phone across the room. It wouldn't solve the problem, but he might get one moment's peace. Though he expected what would actually happen was that Lisa would complain about the cost of a new phone before she asked what was wrong. What broke him out of it was the cold, wet nose of a dog poking at him. He slipped Max a slice of honey-baked ham from his sandwich while Lisa wasn't watching. The dog's tail hit him in the side of the leg as he turned and walked back over to his bed, then yawned, made several circles on the bed, and then flopped down, watching the chaos with disinterest. Tyler's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from his boss. He skimmed it quickly, feeling the pressure mount. Reports were due, meetings were scheduled back-to-back, and he'd need to come in on Saturday to prepare a presentation for his boss. There was a big meeting on Monday that he hadn't bothered to tell Tyler about until now. He glanced at Max and said,
"You don't know how good you've got it. I'd do anything for a vacation where I didn't have to care about what was going on in the world. Just eat and sleep all day like you."
Then turning, he ran directly into Lisa, who was rushing across the kitchen. Hot coffee splashed across his white shirt. He yelped in pain and frustration, grabbing a dish towel to dab at the mess. Just then, his foot came down on a stray Lego piece, and he let out a louder, more pained yelp.
"Seriously?"
Max watched, his mouth falling open and his tongue hanging out. Tyler glared at the dog, his patience wearing thin.
"You think this is funny, Max? Well, I'll bet things would be different if we switched places,"
he exclaimed. The dog's tail wagged again, this time more enthusiastically, and Tyler felt a strange dizziness wash over him. The room spun, and he clutched the counter for support. His vision blurred, and an odd sensation, like falling but without moving, overtook him. His eyes closed involuntarily, and he felt the world tilt on its axis. When he opened his eyes again, the kitchen looked different, larger, more imposing. He blinked, trying to clear his head, but the perspective remained odd. He glanced down and saw paws where his hands should be. Panic set in as he realized he was lying on the floor. No, not the floor, the dog bed. Max's dog bed. His heart raced as he looked around, recognizing the room but from a bizarre, unfamiliar perspective. He tried to stand on two legs but ended up tumbling over, the world around him towering and strange. A friendly, comforting hand rubbed the top of his head, and he heard a voice say something he didn't understand. As he looked up, he saw his own face grinning back at him, and the words,
"Good dog,"
came through. The brain fog of the morning was replaced with an entirely different type of confusion. Not just that he had no idea why he was a dog, but he wasn't even sure why he was asking that question. He opened his mouth to ask, but all that came out was a series of howls, whining, and a single yip. Lisa looked down at him, then smiled, the first smile he had seen on her face in months, and slipped him a slice of ham from the fridge when no one else was looking. She said something, but the only thing he understood was,
"Don't tell Tyler."
The food tasted better than anything he could remember in years, and he tried to eat it slowly, but he swallowed it in a single bite. He then felt his tail begin to move, hitting the side of the chair where his daughter was sitting. The humans continued to talk, and Tyler continued to try to understand them, but most of the words made no sense. And it was hard to focus with so many interesting scents all around the house. He followed them to the door as the four of them pulled on their coats and left. As the door slammed, something important struck Tyler. He had nothing to do. For a moment, that seemed a horror. They hadn't even left the TV on for him. But then he thought about it again. He really had nothing to do. He didn't have to go to work, he didn't have to clean up the mess in the kitchen, or even talk to Lisa. Someone else would drive his kids to school, and sit in meetings all day that didn't do anything except waste his time. As he considered that for a moment, his tail began to wag more than it had before. He then walked over to the dishes a few feet from his bed. There was a fly in the water, and a half-eaten bowl of dog food. He knew that he should probably care about the fly, but he couldn't remember why. There were a lot of things he couldn't remember. So while he was lapping up the water, he tried to think about them. It seemed like it was all human stuff. Stuff that wasn't in the house. Things like the world was getting hotter. He guessed that might still matter to him. He didn't really like the heat, but since he couldn't do anything about it, he simply sniffed the dog food instead. There were a dozen smells coming from it, and Tyler thought he understood why Max had always avoided the dog food unless he had no choice. None of it was terrible, but it just wasn't good. So instead of eating, he walked over to his bed and laid down. He laid on his stomach for a moment, ready to jump up if anything happened, but it didn't take long to realize that nothing was going to happen, so he flopped over on his side and fell asleep. He was woken by a light knock on the door, and then Samantha popped her head in. He jumped up in excitement as he saw her. She said something that ended with,
"Walk,"
and he remembered. Samantha came every day to take Max for a morning walk. She bent down as he rushed over to her, using both hands to rub his head, back, and belly. Then after a few seconds, she snapped the leash onto the ring on his collar. The walk was far too short for Max. But Tyler realized that this was the first real walk he had taken in a year, if you didn't count the walk from his car into his work. As they went, he tried to remember when he had decided it would be easier to pay someone to walk the dog than to do it himself. But he couldn't. It probably wasn't important. Once they were inside the house, Samantha opened the fridge and gave him a full hot dog. As he ate it, she said something again, which ended with,
"Don't tell Lisa."
He wagged his tail, and Samantha dumped out his water and put out a new fresh dish without the fly. It tasted better that way, he decided, and was still drinking when Samantha left. It seemed like it took forever before anything else happened. Then it happened all at once. Lisa and the kids got home first. They exploded into the house without warning, all of them making human noises at the same time. For a moment, he felt the need to tell the kids to stop arguing and to see what Lisa needed, But then he realized he didn't need to do any of that, so instead, he just approached his son. He half expected him to push him away like he did every time that Tyler tried to hug him, but he ruffled the dog's hair, then took a piece of honey-baked ham and said something that ended with,
"Don't tell Mom."
Tyler's tail wagged involuntarily. He then saw himself walk into the house. Max was talking on his phone and wearing a new shirt and pants. He handed a small, gift-wrapped box to Lisa as he hung up the phone. Tyler almost felt sorry for him. Lisa was going to tell him that he needed to be more careful with money for the next 5 minutes. And she was probably right, though he couldn't quite remember why he was worried about money. Something about the economy. Instead, Lisa smiled and then kissed him on the cheek. After that, Max spoke to everyone carefully, using words that Tyler didn't understand, so after trying to listen for a minute or two, he just went and laid down. For the first time all day, Tyler felt bad for himself. He had enjoyed the break, but he was also a bit bored, and had assumed that once everyone got home they'd pay some attention to him, or at least get him dinner. But they made him wait. Couldn't they tell he was about to fall over? He was so hungry. About an hour later, Max, in Tyler's body, took him for a walk while Lisa made him dinner. Max talked the whole time they were walking. Tyler enjoyed that, even though he didn't understand more than one word in 10. Once they got home, Max patted the side of the couch so that Tyler knew it was okay to get up. He climbed up next to them, laying his head against his daughter as they watched something on the TV. He tried to watch it, but the screen was nothing but lines, and he couldn't understand the words, so instead, he just laid there listening to the humans until he fell asleep. That routine was more or less the same for most of the next 2 weeks. Tyler would stay home while everyone else left. He'd go for walks, eat, play with the kids, and even played with Lisa and Max a few times. One of the odder moments was when Samantha came over one evening and stayed there while Max and Lisa went out. Tyler wasn't sure if he was okay with that or not. But when they got home, Lisa seemed happier than she had been in years, and Tyler simply couldn't be upset by that. But there was a worry in the back of his head. He didn't know how he had become a dog, and he didn't know how he was going to get back. And while he was happy now, he knew he didn't want to be a dog forever. He even missed some of the chaos of his day. He missed his daughter's long stories, and his son getting excited about a video game. He even missed some of the things about work. Then, 2 weeks to the minute, he saw himself stumble down the stairs, getting ready for work. He bent down next to Max, ruffled his hair and said,
"Okay. Vacation is over."
Tyler's eyes fluttered open, and he found himself standing in the kitchen, the familiar sounds of morning filling the air. He glanced around, trying to make sense of his surroundings. The kitchen was spotless, the scent of fresh coffee wafting through the air. Lisa stood at the counter, a relaxed smile on her face as she flipped through a magazine.
"Morning, Tyler,"
she said cheerfully.
"Breakfast is ready, and the kids have already left for school."
Tyler blinked in confusion.
"The kids are already gone."
"Yes, thanks to your new morning routine.
Lisa replied.
They've been so organized and on time. By the way, you have a meeting at 10, don't be late."
Shaking his head, Tyler headed to the bathroom. His reflection showed a well-rested face and neatly trimmed hair. His work clothes were laid out perfectly, and a crisp new badge sat on top, Tyler Barnaby, Vice President.
"What the?"
he muttered, slipping on his clothes. When he arrived at the office, his colleagues greeted him with enthusiastic applause.
"Great job on the new initiatives, Tyler,"
one of them said.
"The flexible hours and pet-friendly office policy are a hit."
He sat at his desk, bewildered by the accolades. Emails flooded in, praising his innovative ideas and leadership. He found himself in back-to-back meetings, all celebrating his successes. During one of the meetings, his phone buzzed with a news alert.
Historic peace treaty signed.
Tyler furrowed his brow but didn't have time to read further. Returning home, the house was in perfect order. His kids' report cards showed straight A's, and their teachers had left glowing comments.
"Dad, look at this.
His son said, holding up a World's Best Dad trophy.
I made this for you at school."
Lisa approached, her eyes shining.
You've really turned things around, Tyler. The kids are happier, I'm less stressed, and even Max seems happier.
Max, lying on his bed, looked up and wagged his tail. Tyler knelt down and scratched behind his ears.
What did you do, buddy?
He whispered, half expecting an answer. As they sat down to dinner, the evening news began to air. The anchor spoke excitedly about global developments.
In other news, remarkable strides have been made in international relations and environmental conservation. Experts credit an unexpected figure, Tyler Barnaby, for his groundbreaking mediation efforts and innovative solutions.
Tyler's jaw dropped as he watched footage of himself. No. Max, in front of the United Nations, delivering a speech.
Barnaby's initiatives have ended global hunger, mediated peace treaties, and even tackled climate change.
He glanced at Max, who seemed to give a knowing nod. Tyler shook his head, still trying to process the surreal turn of events. Later that night, as he sat on the couch with his family, Tyler looked at Max.
Maybe I should let you handle things more often,
he said, shaking his head with a smile. Max barked happily, his tail thumping against the floor. Tyler walked over to the fridge, pulled out a slice of honey-baked ham and handed it to Max.
Just don't tell anyone,
he whispered. Max took the food, then gave a subtle wink, and Tyler couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for his good dog. Author's note.
This story was inspired by my frustration listening to the news. Not just because not having to think about the many things that are happening might be nice, but because of something I say almost every day. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. That's because, on any given day, a huge amount of the stress I feel is built around things I cannot change. The problem is, of course, that a lot of them desperately do need to be changed, and while none of us can change them ourselves, we do all need to be part of that solution. That means simply ignoring it isn't an option, no matter how much I wish it was. As I see it, there are a couple of solutions. The more practical is probably to learn to care about those things without letting them cause massive amounts of unnecessary stress, and to take a break from time to time. The second, of course, is to switch bodies with my dog and let her fix all the problems in the world while I take a nap. Not that most of us think of it in that exact way. We just want someone else to fix the problem. Perhaps that will be the government, a corporation, a group of other people, space aliens, artificial intelligence, or even a deity. I'm all for that. But of all of those, I think the most likely is space aliens, with artificial intelligence shortly behind, only because fixing things would require us to create a real AI first. But I think any of those solutions may be a long shot. So for now, I'll just do my best to imagine better worlds and try to share them with you, to make your day just a bit easier. If that has worked, then you should consider signing up for my newsletter at www.ansci-fi.com. When you sign up, you get a free book, as well as free stories every week and my thoughts on writing and the world. You could also sign up as a free member on Patreon. There you can read many of my stories for free and vote on my monthly themes. Finally, if you want to take the next step, patrons at any paid level get access to over 40 Patreon-exclusive stories and can vote every week on what exclusive story I write next. Thank you. Elton Gar.